All right, so today we're going to talk about front ends. Just to show you all, I sent you all a zip file, and the zip file actually contains these three subfolders. In the Slack message, I mentioned like what terminal command you would use to open up these front ends. So depending on what kind of front end you want to use, launching the front end is slightly different. I'm going to start easy to hard. I'll start with Dash, talk about Flask, and then talk about how you can integrate both together. And then what each of those are, I'll get into more detail in a little bit. But basically, all of these are some of my past projects. The data is probably dummy data, so feel free. Today, basically, I'm going to point at what is what, and hopefully that will make it a little bit easier for you all to know what to change and what to edit for your own project, no matter which one you want to do. So the first I'm going to talk about is Dash, and Dash is in here. And you can see that there are three files, really just a Python file and two data files. So Dash, you really mainly have this Python file. You might have like another file with all of your functions as well. Okay, so for Dash, the way that you launch it, of course, I've CD'd into the Dash subfolder at this point. You'd run Python app.py, or really whatever you're naming this Python file. Let me just launch this to show you all what this app looks like, and then we'll talk through why it looks this way. So once I do Python app.py, it takes a little bit because it's actually executing everything in the Python file, which I'll go through later. And then it should give you some sort of local URL. So here it says Dash is running on this. So I'm going to copy and paste this into my browser. And this is going to take a little bit longer to load as well. But you can see this part is loaded. I've just included like a really quick app callback for text input. I know a few of you are doing like NLP projects, so text input might be useful to know. This one doesn't do any functions really, but I can type in whatever I want and it'll update here. If you choose to use Dash for like your NLP project, you can actually do it in a way such that you type in a word, and then in the back end, it runs through some function and then maybe spits out like a prediction or something. And I'll show you where we would do that. And then here I have just this random 3D scatter plot, really doesn't mean anything. And then here I just have a drop down. These are not connected just because these are like, this is from one of my projects and the data is someone's data. So I didn't have it connect to anything, but this is using the exact same code as was in Jupyter Dash. So let me open that up real quick for you all. When you're doing a front end, you got to use a text editor. And here, let me just open a new tab. And my text editor of choice is Atom. I just like Atom because I just think it's the cleanest, but VS Code, I forget what are some of the other ones. Any text editor will work for this. So a few weeks ago at this point, I talked about Jupyter Dash. This is literally Jupyter Dash, the same code exactly. So you can see here, I have like my callbacks. I have this like run server cell. I also have, the site layout. I have I'm defining a bunch of things here. Here I'm also like importing my data files. So in terms of the code and everything that you import is exactly the same as Jupyter Dash, aside from you don't need Jupyter Dash. And then the other one difference is your here, I think in Dash here, instead of Jupyter Dash, you just change it back to Dash. So the rest of the code, exactly the same. I actually created this one in Jupyter Dash first, copied and pasted everything back over onto my text editor to get my Dash app. Where I want to point you all to, like if you have a search or if you have like a text input, I'm going to zoom back in, not to worry. I'm going to point you to the text input. I have this text input over here. And then you can see I am like entering the sample search terms. And here you can see the value is sample searches, value equals sample searches. So we go back here. This started as sample search, and whatever I type here, you can see it automatically outputs over here. And so where that outputs is in a Dash callback. So in this callback, it is this one. So all it is it's taking the input from the value of the raw text, and then it is outputting it into this like user details area. So if you take a look at user details, I believe, yeah, is right now it's just like an empty div, which you can output like text, raw HTML, anything you want. So let's say you wanted to like spit out a prediction of like, maybe you have 5 classes, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. You can actually put your model predict function in this function here. So you can see here, I defined a function, whatever the input value is, I'm just going to return like an HTML of the input value. Alternatively, you can take your input value, do the text pre-processing that you did. You can put that in your function here, have it go through your model as well. And then if 0, maybe output the name of the class. If 1, output that name of the class. So that's one way that you can incorporate your machine learning model into Dash, maybe next to your graphs if you want. I'm not going to go into like all of this code. I think it is the same as Jupyter Dash. So if you want to brush up on that, I think I go into a lot more detail in that other study group. So I do recommend looking into that just so there's not much repetition. But basically, yeah, what I wanted to get at, these are, again, you would do a Dash if you want to mainly use Plotly tools. I like Plotly tools just because, you know, the default formatting is a lot cleaner in my opinion. The graphs are all Plotly graphs, so all of these have like the same syntax as if I were to do Plotly. So for example, like, yeah, PX, I'm using Plotly Express. This is the exact same syntax as for like a Plotly Express graph. So I had done this in my Jupyter notebook in the past. I just needed to like take my code and then just put it into this format. So that's when you would use a Dash. The rest of it, I think, pretty self-explanatory. The only thing was, yeah, you just have to copy and paste everything from Jupyter Dash into this Py file, and then you can launch it. Again, just to show you all, inside this sub repository, I guess, or like in this folder, I just have all the data files that I need to. So keep in mind that you can have, you know, a functions file that you import here and use your functions, and you can also import data. So I have like a pickle just to show that you can have a pickle, and then here I have like CSV. All right. Questions about Dash before I talk about Flask? Because Flask, I think there's a bunch more new stuff to talk about.
One question: will this also give the IP address at the end once when it has to go at the live?
That's right. Yes, it will. So you see here, you mean this URL here? So when I type in python app.py to launch the app, it outputs this URL that I just copied and pasted into my browser, and that's how it shows up.
Okay.
Awesome. Cool. Any other questions? All right. One thing that I learned the hard way was every time you launch something like this. Oh, one actually really neat thing about this is if I were to make any changes in this file and I save the file, it actually automatically reloads. So that's a pretty neat thing about working with Dash, is it just automatically reloads nicely. If you make an edit and the code breaks somewhere, like it hits like an error where it cannot execute the rest of the code, then it'll stop. But yeah, that's just something neat to know. So the thing that I learned the hard way is you have to always exit this while something is loading. It's the same as Jupyter Notebook. You do a Control-C to quit out of it. If not, it would say that something's already running on the port and you won't be able to launch other apps, or you won't be able to relaunch the app. And I haven't figured out how to do it the proper way, but when that happens, I restart my computer, and that's the only way that's the fastest path of least resistance way I've found to figure that, to not have that error anymore. Okay, so this is Dash. I'm not gonna close.
What are you saying? Wait, so when do you have to restart your computer? What do you do?
Oh, while this is running, I have to make sure to manually shut it down. So make sure that you always do like Control-C to shut it down.
After
Don't
you're
just
done with all
like,
your edits.
yeah, don't just like close the terminal window. Don't just close your git bash window, because then
Oh, I see.
something will, yeah, and I don't know how to get that back up. Yeah, there's probably a way to do it, but I haven't figured that out. Okay, so that is dash. The next one I want to show you all is Flask. And Flask, I would suggest using Flask. Hold on, just make sure everything's here. Okay. Oh, wait, what did I do? CD Flask app. There we go. All right. So when you would use Flask instead of Dash, I do think that Flask is better if you don't really need to have your graphs on the front end. Dash is great for showing your graphs because, you know, it has plotly functionality. But if you feel like you don't need any graphs and you mainly just want to have, like, you know, input into your model, output, Flask is sufficient. To run Flask, the command is a little bit longer, and it's also case sensitive. It is Flask app, and I put this in the Slack channel as well. I have it written down. I definitely do not memorize this. Flask app equals app.py, and I'll show you that here. We're going to Flask app. App.py is here. There's quite a few files, and I'll walk through all of these, but app.py is basically where the app is. And then Flask run. So very similarly, when you do this, it gives you a URL. And we're going to use the same URL. And I think it might have been oh, it's not the same, but all right. Okay, this is a text classifier project that I did. And just to show you all how it works, it's a innuendo detector, basically. As you can see, these are HTML. I even embedded a GIF here. I can put in some words, maybe say like, I don't know, coding is cool. And if I submit, it runs my text through a model and then gives you a prediction. And then I also have a link to classify different texts. So this is what the front end could look like. So this would be good, like if you just have like maybe a classification or a regression model that, you know, you just need to take in some inputs, run it through your model, pre-processing also okay, and then spit out some output. So this is what the front end looks like. And let me show you the code for this. Let me go back to here, go back out, CD Flask app, and let's open it up in Atom. So there's a few things that are going on here. So the main one where your app is running is on app.py. This I do recognize looks a little bit intimidating at the start, but I'm going to break it down. The stuff at the top here, I'm not going to explain too much of it. Well, this is importing the stuff that you need to have your Flask app. And Flask is basically like a web app framework. So Flask actually provides the ability for you to, like, you know, have like a web page with different pages. So what this stuff is, I'm honestly not sure either, but just have that there. And as you can see here, I'm importing my functions, and I have like a functions file here of which I'll walk through in a little bit. What each of these are, as you can see, whenever you have a line that starts with an at above a defined function, it's known as a decorator. And a decorator is used a lot more in things like object-oriented programming and like other styles of programming, not as much in data science specifically. But what this is saying is that it's sort of, you can think of it as like a label for your function. And the way that Flask uses decorators is it helps you render pages on a website. So here you can see that there's app.route. And then here I just have like a slash sign. As an example, actually, let me quickly do this as an example. If I were to do @app_route and I do test, and I will return, hold on, let me just change this so it's not gonna clash. If I just return, hopefully this works. Hi, this is a test. Let's save this, hopefully it refreshes fine. Okay, should be okay. If I go to this web page and I go /test, oops, hold on, I might have to shut it down and relaunch it. Okay, sorry, lots of switching windows. I hope it's not too annoying. Okay. If I were to run this /test, you can see it says, it's really small over here, but it says, hi, this is a test. So that just goes to show whatever I do, like in the app route / whatever, it's just like the base URL / whatever it is. Because on this site, on this page, I just want to have, my model, and I don't need like multiple pages. I just have, the /. This is honestly a really good thing. Like, let's say you want to have part of your website to show like a project description. Maybe you have like, I don't know, maybe like an about me page or something like that for your project. You can do this in different routes and you can render different things. What's going on here and why there's two app.routes with the slashes is one is for taking in inputs, one is for taking in outputs. Only if you have input-output relationships, then you need to have two. And for me, I think that it's easier to have your input and output on different pages, and I'll talk about why that is. So that's why I have two. This first one is for taking in the input. That's why you see methods equals to get, because you're getting input. That's how I remember it, at least. And then here we are doing a post request. So we're pushing back the output. That's just how I remember it. And then over here, you can see that I'm using my predict function. I'm getting my text, and I'll show you how we can tell it where to grab the text from. And I'm actually using my function for classify text. So I'll go into that in a little bit. But this is basically a binary classification problem. And so if my prediction came out as 0, I want to render some template. And if the prediction is a 1, it renders a different template. What these templates are, I'll get into as well. There's a lot of things that are kind of interconnected here, so I'll be jumping around quite a good bit. But this prediction function of like classify text actually comes from my functions.py. Again, not my cleanest function, but as you can see here I have like my pre-process, like basically all of the functions that I use to pre-process the text. As you can see here, I'm using a TF-IDF vectorizer. I also manually filtered my words. So this is actually a list of words that I wanted to take in. And then here I actually have my naive Bayes model that I pickled from a Jupyter notebook when I was, working on this project. So as you're putting together your pipeline for processing and predicting text, you have to think about, okay, what are the components of this pipeline that I need to save, whether I pickle it or like save it as a CSV, maybe if you have like specific data that you want to save. For the most part, mine are all in pickles. I think I just have, let's see, I have a pickle file here with like, a bunch of pickles there. So keep that in mind as well. And then as you can see here, I have two main functions, a pre-process function. I don't know why I defined a function in a function. Don't do that. Don't do what I did. But I have a pre-process function that I use here. And so this takes in raw text and then spits out either a 1 or a 0, depending on what class it is. And then therefore, when I go back to the app.py, when the result is a 0, I have one template, result is one template. And basically what that means is, let me go back to this, is let's say I do, I don't know, trees maybe. This is just a different template from the last one. And I'll show you all how I did that. So as you can see, there were 3 HTML templates that I was using. The 2 different templates were like the different possible outputs or predictions. And then also the starting template, the homepage template, this one. All right. So let me do like a quick side-by-side and I can explain each of the templates. So the templates I have in this templates folder, and I have 3 HTML templates here. Basically, this render template method will just, literally just render whatever the template is. So I'll start with the first one, and let me do my window in a side-by-side, and then hopefully you can all see. All right. Let me just resize this so it's a little bit cleaner. Let's close this. And then this, we've seen this, so we don't need to go into it. All right. So some HTML basics. I'm going to zoom out real quick. So HTML is very much like a software thing. It's a front end thing, not super important for data science. So I'm going to do my best to explain it from like a data science perspective. In HTML, I would divide every HTML page into two main parts, the head and the body. The body is what we see on the page. So if we see here, sorry, let me zoom in and out again. You can see that body starts here, ends here. All of this stuff is within the body of the text. And then the head is above. You can see the head starts here, ends here, and the whole thing is wrapped in HTML. I remember when I was doing this, Atom actually has like HTML autocomplete. So when I did this, it automatically populated a lot of the stuff for me. Feel free to just copy and paste and just make edits. So let's talk about the head first. So head, as you can see here, ranges from the top to about here. In the head, I like to think of what's in the head as like metadata, basically stuff that doesn't show up on the page that you might end up using, or it might show up in like other parts. Some stuff that is in the metadata, the title. So the title here is basically, as you can see, I don't know if y'all can you all see this where my mouse is? The label of the page, that's what the title is. So if I change that, this will update. Other things that I put in here are like default styles. I just knew that like I want every like H1 and H1, H3, H4, these are sort of like, you know, when you're doing your markdown, the number of like pound signs before text determines like how big or small it is. So like 1 pound sign would be an H1, 2 pound signs would be H2. So this is how I did it. This style is basically saying for every H1, use this color, every H3, use this color, every H4, use that color. And you can edit the colors you want. You can also define some other styles. So I like everything to be centered on my page. And so I defined this style called center, where these are just the attributes of it. And you'll see me use it later, I think. So that's all the stuff that's defined in the head. Honestly, a lot of this other stuff I took from tutorials, so I'm not entirely sure what they are, but from what I know, they don't really affect anything. Oh, this is the this is basically the colors for A tags, and A tags are basically like hyperlinks. So as you can see here, I have like a GitHub hyperlink that links to the GitHub page. It just tells it to be gray. Okay, so from the head, we go into the body. So the body in HTML reads top to bottom, which is why everything, as you can see, it's kind of like top to bottom. I don't really have too many side-by-side things going on. So to start, I have an H1, which again is like the biggest title. Technically, I could put style equals to center, but this is just the default. Like if you want to center something manually, this, whatever you put into here will override defaults. So just know that. I put this as my H1. This is just my H4, like this subtitle over here. And then I just embedded a GIF and then an input. And then I have the form where I take in the raw text. I have my GitHub URL here, and then that's it. So there's not that many things going on. The body really is just like this much code. The most important thing here is this form, because the form is what takes in your inputs for, you know, for the inputs to go through your model. Some things to remember here. The form has two parts. It has a text input and it also has a submit button. So text input, submit button. These are things that I think if you look up, I think W3 Schools does a really good job at like breaking down each like individual component. But anyways, if you find that you have a lot of text, you can actually set the height and width of this, which is pretty neat. Like if your project is like maybe classifying longer things, like maybe like paragraphs, or you want to copy and paste like news articles, you can put like a bigger text box. Mine, I just needed a small one. The important thing to remember is what you name it. So I would say if you have multiple inputs, which you probably won't have, or if you do have multiple inputs, name them something that is a little bit more indicative of what it is. So you can see here, I named it text, and this will come back later because this is where I tell, where I tell my program where to look for inputs. And then submit button. There's not much to explain there. I can change what's on the submit button by changing the value. All right, but this is basically the overview here I'm talking about is what the HTML looks like, what an HTML template for this looks like. And then also remember the form is important and what you name the text input part of the form. Also here, we're actually posting information to the model. I know like with the get and the post, it gets kind of confusing, but I would say if you're copying and pasting this, just leave it as is. Okay. So here you can see that the input is named text. Question?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to know where you have put in the function for the results. So
Yes.
let's say if somebody
Yep.
has submitted something.
Yeah. Yeah. On the HTML, there's no Python functions at all. How I take this and run it through the function is in the app.py.
Mm-hmm.
So here, what's happening is you have this get, and you know, this is the first page. And so it's rendering that HTML, this HTML that I just showed. Where it starts to take the text and, you know, run it through the model is here. It's in this post method here. To get the text, you use a request. And it's actually the, it's pretty similar to like the request.get that we use for like Beautiful Soup and for APIs. But I mean, yeah, it knows to look for a form and then get anything under the name text. And so basically text will be equal to whatever I had input here. And then I run it through my function. I imported my functions. And again, this is a Python file. So I imported my functions and then I literally just do like classify text with my input of text. And then that's how I get my prediction to be 0 and 1.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is in the py file, and the HTML file is a separate file.
That's right. So there are three main things. So there's the app.py. This is the app.py, the functions.py, where I actually define my classification functions. And then the HTML is all under templates. So it's, I know I can't zoom in here, but these are where my HTML templates are. And it just knows for some reason to look for your templates in the templates folder. So yeah.
No, so there has to be a redirection on the HTML also. There has to be a redirection. So
yeah. If I want to do like multiple classifications, the next thing I'm going to show you all is that on this next page, I'm going to show you all the other templates, like the output templates. I can bring it back to the first page. And then also what I'm going to show you all is like, how do I get this variable to come back and be different every time? That's what I'm going to talk about next. So this part where I'm doing the request.form.get, it just knows, and I'm not sure exactly why either, but it just knows to look for, you know, the form input that I named text and use that for my prediction or for whatever function I'm doing here. Next, to talk about the other templates. So I'm going to talk about this one. So this one is this template over here. Same thing, very, very similar. I have the head and, you know, here's just a different title. I also have like, I think I literally copied and pasted the template from the front page and just, you know, cut it down. And in this body, you can see the body here is really only just like 3 lines. And let me just see if I can make this smaller and then this smaller. Okay. So if you remember when I rendered the template here, I have variable equal to text. Variable equals to text, and text was my input, if you remember that. So variable equal to text. The first thing I'm going to talk about is like, how do I get this to be there? It's just the way that Python and HTML interact with each other. So in this file, you said variable. This is just a syntax for taking in a variable. It's just double curly brackets. And so that's how it knows to take in that. If I want to call this something else, if just, let's say I said you said input, this can be named whatever. Like the name of this argument doesn't matter. Okay, so very, very similar. I have my H3, I put in H1, embedded a GIF, and then finally, I have the URL to go back to the main page. Because the main page has the same URL, the href is actually an empty string. So that's the part that I think confuses some people. So this is basically how you do a URL. You do like an A tag with an href. And then, yeah, to make it go back to the home page, you just give it an empty string. If you want to do like another URL, let's say you want to say like, oh, how did I do this? I would just do another version of this. And let's say I wanted to bring it to my other page of what it was called. It's called test. And then maybe let's just assume that's like my about me page. I could do about me or something like that. And then I had that test route defined here, and I can return whatever. If you want to do a different HTML template, you can return render template, whatever. So that's how you get like multiple pages in a web app. Any questions about this?
So for this project, we need to create one like this.
Are you asking like, must you have a front end?
Yeah.
No, you don't have to have a front end. A front end is completely optional. So if you don't want to do a front end for your project, you really do not have to. I will say a lot of data scientist roles don't expect you to have much front end experience. So this is really just so that, you know, some people want to have a way to showcase their project in a more visual, fun way, I guess. I would say it's probably more useful to show your ability to create like a dashboard. So I would say like Dash is probably the most useful one out of all the ones I'm going to show you today, because Dash, you know, like sometimes if you're doing like a data analyst role, they want to see your ability to work with visualization, and Dash is an easy way to show off that you can use that you can, you know, maybe arrange visualizations in a meaningful way, stuff like that. But yeah, no pressure to create a front end if you don't have the time to or want to.
Okay.
Right. Let me undo this real quick. Okay. Just really quickly, the template for the other one, like for the other result, is exactly the same, just like different content. All of these other files are here because I decided to host this app on a web page. I'm not actually going to go into explaining how to do that exactly, but because I only know how to do that by going through some walkthroughs. And so I'm going to link those walkthroughs after this. I will send you the 2 tutorials that I went through to put a Flask app onto Heroku. And Heroku is basically like, it's a free hosting site where you can have your own website and like have your project, like basically have this as a website. So I will link those out. So all of these other things like requirements.txt, nltk.txt, what else? The V and V files, NLTK data, these are all files that are only necessary if you want to put it onto Heroku. And I'll share the walkthroughs that I had used. Those are pretty good. And I think way better than I can explain them. Okay. So let me just get everything back real quick. Any questions about Flask before I move on?
Can Flask be, right, whatever code we write there, can we post it on AWS and then make it live?
So AWS, yes, you can. I'm not sure how to though, because AWS is sort of like, I really only know how to use it from like a database perspective. So what you can do is hook up your Flask app to query data from AWS. in a very similar way as when I talked about creating SQL databases, you know how I did like the create engine and I did like cursor.execute, whatever the functions were. So you would just have that in your Python scripts when you're like pulling in data. I'm not sure how to use AWS web hosting. That part I don't have experience with. I'm honestly not too sure.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, so the last front end I'm going to show you all is a combination of Flask with Dash. So what if you want to have a website with both? And to launch that, it's python run.py. I'm going to show y'all, this one is pretty complicated, especially in terms of how you organize your files. So let me just do Flask with Dash, and then let's open it up in Atom. All right. So hold on, let me just also get the web page. Oh, why did it go to Medium? Mind. Okay. All right. So this is just a different project. And this is the dashboard. As you can see, again, just dummy graphs. Exactly the same kind of code that you would do on a Jupyter Dash or a regular Dash. On the other hand, and let me just double check what the route is. Okay, if I do /model, you can see I have another text classifier. This is actually my like mod 3 project. I did not do this when I was doing mod 3. I did this way after, but exactly the same stuff as what I just showed you just now. What I wanted to talk about is when you're doing Flask with Dash, the files are a lot more complicated. By the way, I have this notes.md file. I used to only talk about Flask with Dash, so that's why the notes are in there. But in the base of it, you have a run.py. I would say just copy and paste this. Don't worry about what this is because I honestly cannot explain it either. Here I have notes if you want to just, have like a written version of what everything is. And then everything actually belongs in a Dash package. So this file structure and this architecture actually comes from Dash and Plotly's their tutorial on how to set something up with Dash and Flask. So this file structure is where I got that from. The run.py is basically how you run the app. If you remember over here, how I launched this app was I did python run.py. Even though there's nothing else here, run.py for some reason knows how to get into the Dash package and run this init file, which I'll talk about a bit too. So it goes from like run.py, goes into the Dash package. Similar to if anyone remembers like object-oriented programming, when you just initialize something, it automatically looks at the init. I'll talk about what's in the init in a little bit. And then I have all of my other files in my Dash package. So what's in this init file? In this init file, I'm launching my Flask server. And this is actually the same thing that was in the last one. I don't know what that is. I have my Flask server, and then I also have my Dash app being created here. So I have my Dash app being created here, and the base path name, which means like what is the URL that has my Dash app, as you can see here, now this is /model, but this is just /dash. This is just like the landing page. I'm going to talk about the Dash part first and then talk about the other Flask pages. And then from here, I'm importing routes. The reason why, technically, and this might be a little bit confusing, but trust me on this, all of these files, right? All of these files are inside of the folder Dash package. However, when I import stuff, even though init is also in Dash package, I have to do from Dash package import routes or routes. The reason for that is you're running the app from run.py, which is outside Dash package, which is why like if I were looking at like my dashboard here, I have to do dash package.functions import star. I cannot just do functions import star, even though functions and dashboard are in the same folder. of dash package, I still have to do dash package.functions. This is just something that people have run into. I know that's not the best explanation, but it's mainly because you're running the app from outside of dash package. If this is an issue, the error that will come up, and it will come up in your terminal when you try to launch it, it will just say like no file or no module name functions found. And then you would guess that you would have to just fix your import statements. Okay, so back to the init. Here I'm doing my dash with the base URL dash, and then I import routes here. I'm not sure why you have to import routes here, but you just have to. So because we're importing routes, let's just take a look at routes real quick. Here I have a few URLs under routes, very, very similar to what I had before. Like this part is exactly the same. Instead of doing it slash by itself, I have slash model, where, you know, I have a classifier, and then here, and let me just go back to slash model real quick. Slash model, if I input some text, painting is cool. If I submit this, I have one result. And if I classify something else, I like to code. It's a more programming text. That was just what my project was. And here I link to the dashboard. So the Flask part of it, exactly the same. And actually, let me just run through that part really quick. Same, I have like the two routes of like the get and post request. I also have my functions, and my functions, this is actually very similar functions to what I had before. My classification functions, my pre-processing functions. These are just other functions I'll talk about in a little bit. And then, yeah, I have my HTML templates as well. This was just a test one. I have art, classifier, programming. Those are just exactly the same as what I talked about with Flask by itself. Where it gets a little bit more complicated is, as you can see, I have to define the dashboard URL. And this is just something that you have to do to have Flask interact with Dash. If you remember when we were doing the dashboard by itself, we didn't tell it to have any like route because we didn't use Flask, and it just knew because it was just the one thing to, you know, output the dashboard no matter what it was. So to just have Flask interact with Dash, you have to return app.index. And I'm actually getting my app from the dashboard here. So now that we've talked about this, and by the way, this is just another page. If I do like /hello, oops, if I do /hello, it's the same thing as I was showing you just now. It's just that. Okay, so back to the dashboard. I'm importing the dashboard from here, dashboard.py. And if you see here, this is just, you know, very, very similar. App.layout, which is basically, you know, the layout of the app. And it's, again, same as Jupyter Dash, same as the dashboard. Instead, everything is just defined here. What I also want to show you all here is that where you define like functions or like variables doesn't really matter. So as you can see here, I just defined a list of like x equals to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, really just for, you know, the sake of these graphs. And defining my list here of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for my graph, assuming that that's like, you know, my data. And then I import functions, and from functions I have these few functions here. Very, very simple, like a hello function times 2 divided by 2, a graph title. So if I go back to my dashboard, you can see that in my data, I'm actually using some of these functions. So for example, my title actually is a function of like say hello. So therefore, is it hello or is it, yeah. So there's my hello there. What else? Oh, here, I'm using the ×2 function. I'm using the half function to create my graph. So if you find that you just have like a lot of raw data in like a big file and you want to do like pre-processing functions on that, you can actually define that in your layout. It doesn't matter so much where you define your functions. Oh yeah, and I'm also using the title here. So title equals to title, which was, if you see my function here, I just had it be like graph title with exclamation points. That's where you get the title here. So this is the dashboard. One thing I keep forgetting to add is like an a link to the model from this page. I haven't done that yet, which is why I always have to like do /model manually. But yeah, other than that, everything's the same. I would say the most confusing part for doing a Flask with Dash app is really just the fact that the file structure is a little bit weird, and then your import statements are also a little bit strange. So yeah, just to remind you all, you always have to just do dash package dot whatever the file name that you want to import from. Okay, so hopefully that is enough explanation for you all to, if you want, just take my templates and then just reformat it for your own project. Again, I really want to reiterate that you don't have to create a front end. It's good to know, to be honest. I think like sometimes, and I've actually done this in like some of my contract work as well. If they want to show, if you just want to show, you know, who you're working for or your like client or something, if you want to just show them like a very, very quick mock-up of your machine learning model, this is a very, very visual and I think an effective way to just show it off. So, I mean, yeah, definitely not something that you have to do in like the next week, but something that I do think is a useful thing to just maybe be aware of. And then when you need to do that, then maybe you can look this up again. But yeah, regarding this, I know it's a lot. More than happy to like help sit down and debug. Fun fact, like when I was a student, this was our mod 1 project, which was very traumatizing for me. So I've gotten pretty good at debugging this stuff, I think. So if anyone has issues with this, or if anyone's working on this, and even after graduation, feel free to let me know. I'm happy to sit down with you and figure it out. All right. Any questions regarding any of these front ends or front ends in general? And I'll stop the recording. All right.